Chapter 10, Illegal. Looks like this. Room 85 on the fourth floor was slowly becoming Morgan's bedroom. Every few days she noticed something new and brilliant, something she loved instantly, like the mermaid bookends that showed up on her shelf one day, or the black leather armchair shaped like an octopus that curled its tentacles around her when she read. One night, several weeks ago, the bed had changed from plain white headboard to an ornate wrought iron frame while she slept in it. The Deucalion obviously thought it had made a mistake, though, because 2 days later, she awoke swinging in a hammock. Her favorite thing of all was the small framed painting of a bright golden molded gelatin sculpture which hung above the toilet. At first, she thought it was Jupiter Fenn changing things in secret, testing her gullibility. Until once, in the middle of the night, she stepped into her bathroom for a drink of water, only to see the bathtub growing 4 Italian-shaped silver feet before her eyes. Strangest of all, the size and shape of the room were changing. Where there was once a single square window, she now had 3 arched ones. One day, her bathroom was the size of a ballroom and had a tub like a swimming pool. The next day, it was no bigger than a closet. Soon there were windows full of red flowers, a skeleton hat stand wearing a gray fedora in her size, and thick vines of ivy twisting halfway up a stone fireplace. And for the first time ever, Morgan Crow felt that she was in exactly the right place. Midway through spring, a man in a mud-browned uniform came to the Hotel Deucalion. His mustache curled all the way to his cheekbones, and the light glinted off a silver badge on his chest. He stood in the concierge desk, hands stiffly behind his back, appraising the hotel foyer with an undisguised contempt. Kettigree had fetched Jupiter and Morgan from the smoking parlor where they sat in a cloud of forest green vapor, rosemary smoke for sharpening the mind, playing a game of cards. Neither was certain of the rules, but Frank whispered advice in Morgan's ear, and Dame Chandra did the same for Jupiter, and every now and then someone would yell, "Huzzah!" and the others would scowl or throw something, and all things considered, Morgan thought it was a pleasant way to spend an afternoon. They both felt a bit put out when Kettigree insisted they hurry to the foyer, and Morgan was even more annoyed when she saw the mustached man sneer disapprovingly at the small misshapen chandelier, which was still regrowing. Rude, she thought. It's not ready yet. The chandelier was creeping back to health day by day, but it still had a long way to go. At this stage, it was impossible to see what form it would take. Veenstra had opened a betting pool. Frank swore up and down it would be a magnificent peacock, but Morgan was still hopeful it might come back as the same pink sailing ship that Jupiter had loved. "What's the stink doing here?" Jupiter murmured to Kettigree, who shuddered as he scooted off behind the concierge desk. "Who's the stink?" whispered Morgan. "Ah, I meant the Nevermore City Police Force," Jupiter said under his breath. "We probably shouldn't call it the stink," not to his face. "Actually, let me do the talking." Jupiter approached the man and shook his arm amiably. "Good afternoon, officer. Welcome to the Hotel Deucalion. Checking in?" The man scoffed. "Not likely. You're the perpetrator, correct? Jupiter North, how do you do?" "Captain Jupiter Amadeus North," said the man, consulting a notebook. Esteemed member of the Wondrous Society, the League of Explorers, the Federation of Nevermore Hoteliers, Secretary of Oneable Rights Commission, volunteer book fighter for the Gobelin Library, chairman of the Charitable Trust for Decommissioned Robot Butlers, discoverer of 17 previously undocumented realms, and the Snazzy Man's Magazine Snazzy Man of the Year 4 years running. "Very impressive, Captain. Anything I missed?" "I also give tap dancing lessons to underprivileged hoodlums, and I'm on the judging panel for the annual Blackberry Pie Bake-Off at the Nevermore Maximum Security Rehabilitation Center for the Criminally Insane." Morgan laughed out loud at that, although she wasn't sure whether Jupiter was joking. "Well, aren't you a saint?" "I'm only in it for the pie," he winked at Morgan. The officer sneered. "Think you're funny?" "I often do think that, yes. Is there something I can help you with, Inspector?" Morgan followed Jupiter's gaze to the man's badge, which read Inspector Harold Flitlock. Inspector Flitlock sucked his punch and tried to look down his nose at Jupiter, which was difficult, as Jupiter was several inches taller than him. "I'm here acting on an anonymous tip. One of your wondrous pals has turned you in, North, for harboring an illegal refuge. That's big trouble, that is. Jupiter smiled serenely. It certainly would be big trouble if it were true. You're entering a candidate for the Wondrous Society trials this year. Is that correct? Correct. And this is the candidate, is it? Her name is Morgan Crow. Inspector Flicklock narrowed his eyes at Morgan and brought his face down close to hers. And where exactly are you from, Morgan Crow? Nunya, replied Morgan. Jupiter tried to turn his snort of laughter into a cough. She meant to say she's from the 7th pocket of the Free State, Inspector. She just pronounces it funny. Morgan glanced at her patron. He had the same cool, confident air as when he'd spoken to Border Control the Border Control guard on her first day in Nevermore. Inspector Flicklock slapped his notebook in the palm of his hand. Now listen here, North. The Free State has strict border laws, and if you're harboring an illegal refuge, you're breaking about 28 of them. You're in a lot of trouble here. Sonny, illegals are a plague, and it's my solemn duty to guard the borders of Nevermore and protect its true citizens from Republic scum trying to weasel their way into the Free State. Jupiter turned serious. A noble and valiant cause, I'm sure, he said, protecting the Free State from those most in need of its help. Flitok scoffed, smoothing his oily mustache. I know your type. You're bleeding hearts. You'd let anything in here if we gave you half a chance. But I think you might find this scummy illegal of yours more trouble than she's worth. Jupiter looked him dead in the eye. Don't call her that. A chill crept up Morgan's spine. She realized that cold wrath in Jupiter's voice, the ice in his hard blue eyes. Flitok, however, wasn't so quick to catch on. I'll call her what she is, which is a dirty, stinking, rotten illegal. You can't fool me, North. Either hand over her papers, her legitimate citizen papers, or hand yourself over for arrest. This is filthy illegal for immediate deportation. The inspector's words echoed in the lobby, bouncing off the high ceilings. A few of the staff wandered in, drawn by Flitok's raised voice. Everything all right in here, Captain North? Asked Kettigree, leaving the concierge desk to stand beside them with Martha. What a terrible ruckus, said Dame Chandra. She put her arm around Morgan and glared at Flitok. Did somebody call for security? Feenstra said from the staircase, where she sat casually cleaning her enormous claws as if preparing for a meal. Shall I bite his kneecaps, Jove? Asked Frank, the vampire dwarf, sticking his head through Jupiter's legs. That won't be necessary. Everything's fine, thank you. You can all go. Then they reluctantly left, except for Fen, who stayed just where she was. Jupiter was silent for some time while Flitok shot nervous looks in the Magnificent's direction. When Jupiter finally spoke, it was in quiet, measured voice. You have no right to demand the papers of someone who falls under the jurisdiction of the Wondrous Society, Flitok. We deal with our own lawbreakers. She's not in the society. You need to brush up on your one law handbook, Flinty. Article 97, Clause F. A child who is participating in the entrance trials for the Wondrous Society shall, for all legal purposes, be considered a member of the Wondrous Society for the duration of said trials, or until he or she is removed from the trial process. All legal purposes. That means she's already ours. A feeling of righteous relief coursed through Morgan. Already ours. She looked at Flitok, emboldened by the knowledge that the Wondrous Society law was on her side. Flitok's face colored bright red, then purple, then finally white, contorting with rage. His mustache quivered. For now. She's yours for now, North. But as soon as she fails the trials, I'll be wanting to see those papers of hers. He stroked his mustache and straightened his mud-brown uniform, looking at Morgan as if she were something disgusting on the bottom of his shoe. She'll be back to her filthy republic before you can say, please, Inspector, have pity. And you, my friend, will be in so much trouble, even your precious society won't be able to help you. Flitok marched out the Decalions' foyer and down the steps of the forecourt and was gone. Morgan turned to Jupiter, who looked as tense as she'd ever seen him. Can they really kick me out? She said, a lump forming in her throat. She thought of the hunt of smoke and shadow, its black, shapeless form looming in the darkness. The back of her neck felt prickly and cold. What happens if I have to leave Nevermore? Don't be silly, Mog, Jupiter said bracingly. That's never going to happen. He left the foyer without looking at her. When Morgan went to bed that night, her hammock had changed again, this time to a wooden bed frame with stars and moons carved into the legs. She slept restlessly and dreamed of the show trial. In her dream, she stood silently before the elders, unable to speak, until finally she was dragged away by the stink and handed over to the hunt while the audience jeered and booed. By morning, her bed was a futon. Perhaps the Deucalion hadn't made up his mind about her after all. And next we will do chapter 11.